skills, but also with his humane approach in solving problems for the common people of this constituency and elsewhere. We are all amazed by his contribution to the body of knowledge through a number of books, articles, columns, and several other forms of expression. His tweets always give a perspective which others may miss in the clutter and chaos of issues rocking the nation. A truly global citizen who has his feet firmly on the ground. Dr. Shashi Tharoor is always inspiring young minds. I wholeheartedly welcome Dr. Tharoor to this online gathering. Now let me welcome Dr. Georgie K.I., our respected and beloved principal of Marivanios College, who supported us throughout this effort. Sri A.V. Sri Kumar, manager DC Books, who attractively published this book, and Dr. N. Muhammad Ali, chairman of Board of Studies, Journalism and Mass Communication of our college, to this program. I also welcome Sri M.G. Radhakrishnan, chief editor Asianet News, Sri E.P. Unni, senior cartoonist of the Indian Express, Sri Damodar Prasad, director EMMRC, Calicut University, Sri C.S. Venkateswaran, renowned writer and critic, Dr. Lakshmi Pradeep, head of the department and assistant professor of JMC Farooq College, Ms. Dibamol Thomas, assistant professor, Department of Journalism and Mass Communication, Marivanios College, to the webinar and COVIDian conversations. Let me have the privilege to welcome Sri Joskaria, Sri B. Srijan, Sri Nandagopal Rajan, Dr. M.S. Harikumar, Dr. Lal Mohan, Dr. Shaju PP, Dr. Abdul Munir B, Dr. Soni Jairaj, and Dr. Nidin Kalorch to this function. I am thankful to each and every participant who found time to attend this online meeting and webinar. Welcome you all. Thank you once again, Dr. Tharoor and Srimati Shailaja teacher for finding time to grace this function. Thank you. Now let me invite, in the absence of Srimati Shailaja teacher, to begin the book release function by saying a few words, Dr. Shashi Tharoor.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Sanjeev. It really is for me a pleasure to join you all this morning to take part in the launch of COVID-19 Infodemic, Problem, Prospect, and Retrospect, the collection of essays that you have just described and introduced to all of us, published by DC Books, that has brought together the experiences and inputs of a distinguished and diverse group of experts. DC are my own publishers in Malayalam, and it's very good to see them doing such an excellent job of bringing out an attractive volume in English. Now, this is certainly a timely publication for a number of reasons. As a society, we are continuing to face the devastating impact of the COVID-19 virus, which shows little sign of abating in India. Our country crossed 66 lakh cases yesterday, over 1 lakh fatalities. Kerala, too, despite initial gains accrued during the first few weeks and months of the pandemic, has reported 7,800 new cases over the weekend, a grim reflection of the challenges on the road ahead. Secondly, at the same time, while a number of experts and commentators have frequently shared their inputs on COVID, including their feedback, their advice on how to deal with the pandemic, there remains little for the general public to access in terms of a concerted effort to understand the information epidemic, the catalog and collect information on the pandemic. And this publication therefore offers a much needed resource for anyone seeking to understand the diverse implications of the virus better. And third, of course, such efforts are key to establishing a much needed guiding framework, not just to comprehend the virus in itself, but critically analyze our response systems to the virus and how we could have done better, and the role of information in guiding our response. Knowing this is the key, in my view, to ensuring that our systems evolve for the better and are more suited to responding to such threats to the well-being of our society in the future. I must say I'm struck by how apt the title and its theme of COVID-19 Infodemic is, because as I'm sure all of us recognize, the war against COVID-19 is also in many ways an information war, or to be more specific, a war against both the lack of information and a war against disinformation, which continues to spread abundantly thanks to the widespread penetration of social media, WhatsApp, and internet-enabled smartphones. The term infobesity was new to me, and I thank Joe Iscaria for it, because our inboxes were all bloated by infobesity about miracle cures. To revive an old phrase, at the peak of the infobesity moment, if you did not read all this, you were uninformed, but if you read them all, you were misinformed. I must compliment Dr. Sanjeev, because the essays in the volume are very well chosen and range from media practices in general to cartoons, from gender fault lines to political communication. The authors are also experts in their fields, well qualified and eminent in their own right. I realize many of them are here today. And I think the result of their collaboration with your coordination is an invaluable and path-breaking volume. During the course of the pandemic and their response to the pandemic, governments across the world have largely chosen one of two paths, and there's perhaps a surfeit of information about both. In some cases, notably Canada and New Zealand, there was a concerted effort by the government to act in a transparent manner, where information was provided to the public in a rigorous way, starting from the head of the government, often the Prime Minister would hold daily briefings on the subject, to local state agencies that actively ensured the dispersal of vital information on the subject. An effort was made to equip the public with the necessary know-how and awareness on COVID-19. Effectively, the state recognized that the people were active stakeholders in this issue, and therefore the conversation, and more specifically the response, needed to be a collaborative effort. This was really what I celebrated in Kerala's response as well at the beginning of the crisis. When the state acted in such a transparent manner, the people were taken into confidence and in turn repaid this trust by actively supporting the efforts of the government to tackle the spread of the virus. But as we know, in many cases, governments, including the government of India and New Delhi, decided to take the second approach, where the circulation of authentic and reliable information was not given the priority it deserved. I'm afraid our own example is a sad example of this category. We're starting from the Prime Minister, who held no briefings on the subject and only chose to come on air to make some rather bizarre announcements about lighting lamps and banging plates. And of course, the initial shock and awe announcement of the lockdown, to even the Union Health Minister, who abdicated his own responsibilities by allowing a bureaucrat to conduct the briefings rather than doing so himself. And the briefings then ended after they were going nowhere after a few weeks. And of course, the bureaucrat who had acquired a certain amount of notoriety then ended up getting COVID-19 himself. So the entire thing as an information exercise was a disaster from start to finish. And at the same time, there was little effort made to either take parliament or state governments, the opposition, or generally the public of this country into confidence. In such cases, inevitably, in all countries that behave like this, chaos followed. So when, for instance, a lockdown was originally announced in India without consulting state governments or without providing ample notice and resources, particularly for marginalized groups, to prepare for such a lockdown, the end result, as we have seen, was one of widespread difficulty and pandemonium. And as today's grim numbers reflect, the failure to take the nation and stakeholders within it into confidence has had disastrous effects, which we are continuing to face today. I think the use of force, particularly police lathis in many parts of India immediately after lockdown was announced. And I think the very mistaken decision by the Kerala government in recent weeks to send armed commandos to certain coastal villages, this is the opposite of the healthy approach that Kerala had first taken and that the successful countries first took, of using effective community-based information networks to bring awareness of the pandemic to the most interested and affected people, namely the general public. And I think we need to use this book and its lessons to remind people that information is actually indispensable for the health of society, as well as for the health of individuals within it in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I want to thank once again the efforts of Dr. Sanjeev for his efforts, the excellent work of the other contributors. I have only just received the book, so I can't say that I have read all the pieces, even though I dipped into as many as I could in the last hour. just to say that it's important for the public and policymakers alike to understand and access the role of information in combating this pandemic. And I would say that your book will allow us to take stock of how we as a society have responded to the virus, where we've succeeded, where we could have done better. Arguably, our communities across the country have never faced a challenge like this before. And in many ways, we have been forced to write the rule book for the first time while actively dealing with the virus itself. And therefore, I don't want to give the impression that I'm completely and totally critical. The fact is there are many positives in our approach that deserve to be recognized, because, you know, we were kind of repairing the engine while the train was moving. And that is not something that is easy to do. But I don't think anyone will contend that with the right information and resources at our disposal, that we can and should be able to do better in the future. For this reason, I strongly commend your book. I'm looking forward to formally receiving it from the Health Minister. And I hope that one can publicize the existence and availability of this volume in a language which will make sure it is read throughout the country and not only in our state, so that the role of information can be widely understood and lessons from it applied in the future as well. Thank you very much for having invited me to receive the first copy of this impressive volume. Much appreciated. Nandi Namaskaram. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, for that wonderful speech on COVID-19 infodemic and the information ecosystem that we are living in. I don't know, ministry is yet to join us, so I think we should move on with the felicitation.
Let me in that case just thank you all for this copy, which I will deem to have been received, if that's all right with you.
It's okay.
My respects to the minister. She can hold up her copy at the appropriate moment, but I can certainly, once she has done so, we can go for the information approach and tweet on social media that I have received it. So there we are. I'll just take a picture in a minute, or perhaps you can do that and send it to me, so that we can give you the publicity this book rightly deserves. There you are. A book that has not yet been presented has been received. But there we are. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us. It's wonderful to have you in this conversation. Thank you. And now may I invite our respected principal, Dr. Georgie K.I., principal of Marivanias College, to say a few words and felicitate us. Dr. Georgie K.I.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Is it audible?
Yes, sir. It's audible.
Yeah. Honorable Minister for Health and Social Justice, Srimati K.K. Shailaja Teacher. Honorable Member of Parliament, Dr. Shashi Tharoor. Respected Mr. A.V. Srikumar, Manager, DC Books. Respected Dr. N. Muhammad Ali, Chairman, Board of Studies, Journalism Department. My dear and respected Dr. S.R. Sanjeev, the editor of this book and head of the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication. Distinguished guests, respected teachers, friends, and dear students. A very warm good morning to one and all. As human beings, we find ourselves thrown to the mercy of powers beyond our control, facing unforeseen historical crossroads, whether we like it or not. Emerging out of these doldrums will require exercising all our humanity in all its intensity. Fortunately or unfortunately, we are going through such a transition phase, and emerging victorious is not a choice but a necessity. As we know, we are all passing through a hard time fighting the pandemic COVID-19. It is very likely that a new age is formed in the trajectory of human history called COVID age. There are no areas left unaffected by COVID-19, directly or indirectly. The increasing death toll, crumbling economies, the influx of information, helplessness of scientific rationality, etc., signal that it is high time to redefine our priorities and outlook towards life. The numerous changes that followed the pandemic have made humans conditioned to a new normal. The deadly virus has reaffirmed the age-old ecological belief that humans are not an inevitability. In this post-truth COVID age, where half-truth and untruth are veiled as absolute truths, authentic information is a prized commodity. During this pandemic, we have learned that accurate and timely information can save many lives all over the world. At this time, I believe the circulation of unverified information that has gone viral has created unnecessary phobia in human consciousness. Thus, what we need to combat the infodemic in the middle of this pandemic is nothing but authentic and timely information. The book COVID-19 Infodemic Problem, Prospects and Retrospect, the route maps of Kerala, is a giant leap taken towards the attainment of this goal. The book rightly observes in the preface, fostering a truthful and responsible information ecosystem is crucial in the containment of pandemic. The generations to come need to know how information is generated and circulated during a pandemic, and how authentic information is instrumental in leading a society in the right direction. This book, COVID-19 Infodemic, edited by Dr. S.R. Sanjeev, throws light upon the unexplored dimensions of pandemic. With an insightful journalistic approach, he restates the need for authentic information that will truly help people not to panic during the pandemic. Dr. S.R. Sanjeev is a vibrant personality who has preserved his passion for active journalism even after choosing an academic career. He engages with his audience through astute observations and analysis, especially during the budget discussions. Dr. Sanjeev's media interventions are valued by the community of journalists, testified by the multiple internationally known figures he has brought to our college. He is a critical presence among the intelligentsia of the capital city and lends out his expertise in academic enterprises as well as media initiatives. On behalf of the Marivanus College fraternity and all the participants of this online gathering, I congratulate Dr. Sanjeev for the immense effort he has taken amidst this contemporary circumstance for making this socio-culturally relevant literary work a reality. Congratulations, dear sir. The book published by DC Books documents an age and its power structures that humanity has never experienced before. I am sure the great initiatives taken by its contributors will be archived for the post-COVID generations to know how we thrived and lived in a new normal. I appreciate the valuable efforts of all the 14 renowned contributors and the DC book for the successful publication of this book. As part of this book release function, a webinar on COVIDian conversations is also arranged. Eminent personalities in journalism and related fields will be sharing their views on the topic. I take this opportunity to congratulate the Department of Journalism Marivenius College for their great initiative. Dear friends, although light is yet to be seen at the end of the dark COVID tunnel, we are all optimistic, believing this too shall pass. Wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Those are very kind words. Now, let me invite Sri A.V. Sri Kumar, Manager, Publications, DC Books, to say a few words. So, sorry, I think Mr. Sri Kumar has noted, I think he lost his connection or something. Dr. Muhammad Ali, I request you to say the vote of thanks even before having the full, speeches. But I think we should move on. So, Dr. Muhammad Ali, to say vote of thanks.
Good morning. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, okay. In fact, for all of us, it is indeed a privilege to be part of this noble venture. And the book on infodemic during this pandemic time, edited by our beloved S.R. Sanjeev, is here jointly released by Honorable Minister Srimati Shailaja Teacher. So the virtual consent is considered to be the present during this online time. Then Honorable Member of Parliament, Dr. Shashi Tharoor. We know both these leaders participated online, or at least they consider this venture despite all their busy schedule. We must mention our deep sense of appreciation for their love and consideration. On behalf of the organizers of this program, Marivenius College, and the authors of this book, I wish to express a big thank you to both the minister as well as Member of the Parliament, Dr. Tharoor, during this time. Then it is with the academic and infrastructural facilities extended by Marivenius College and its leader, our respected principal, Dr. George K.I. We could not conduct this program in this memorable fashion, and we are very grateful to the principal and the college as a whole. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. The book is published by DC Books Kottayam. As you know, it is one of the major well-known professional publishers in India. I must mention the deep sense of appreciation for the editor of this book, Dr. S.R. Sanjeev, as a friend as well as one of the authors of the book. I know the pain he took to edit and materialize this publication. It's an appropriate intellectual response, as said by Dr. Tharoor. It is an intellectual response from media to this pandemic situation and the discourses centered on it. Dr. Sanjeev deserves a big thank you. Let's give him an applause for the idea and its fruition. Also, as I told you, the book is published by DC Books under the leadership of Ravi DC, as well as the direct control of Mr. Ravi Srikumar, Manager, Publication, DC Books. We hope that Mr. Ravi Srikumar will join us soon. The professional approach of the publisher is very much evident in the design and production of the book and the publisher's timely decision to respond to the situation. And many of the earlier speakers already told it is a kind of very valuable archive for the generation to come over the post-pandemic time. And I also thank all the authors of the book, as well as the panelists in this program, in this webinar, Asianet editor, M.G. Radhakrishnan, and film critic, Dr. C.S. Venkatesh, and my friend and writer, Director of EMMRC University of Calicut, Dr. Damodar Prasad, my colleague and friend, as well as a media academician, Dr. Rashmi Pradeep, well-known cartoonist, Mr. E.P. Unni, Dr. Lal from University of Kerala, Dr. Shaju P.P., Dijo Jacob, Dr. Munir, and Sonil Jalraj, many others who participated in this venture. I also thank all those who supported us to bring out this book as well as to conduct this program in a very very interesting way, in a privileged way. I thank you, all of you, on behalf of the authors as well as Mar Ivanios College, being the chairman of Board of Studies there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mohammad Ali. We should move on with the webinar, and once Srimati Shailaja teacher joins, I think she will speak immediately by interrupting the webinar for some 10 minutes so that we can hear her. Let us begin the webinar by, let me welcome Sri M.G. Radhakrishnan, Chief Editor, Asianet News, to make introductory remarks. So he has also contributed to this book in a through an article. Sri M.G. Radhakrishnan.
Good morning, everybody. And Sanjeev in particular, I just want to thank him for bringing out this book and for inviting me also to join the group, which made this book possible. And should we speak in English, Sanjeev? We all happen to be Malayalis, and what is the point in speaking in English? It looks quite...
We have some participants from outside Kerala.
All right. Then it's okay.
And the book is also in English, so I thought it would be better.
Then it's okay. Then it's okay. Even there's one person who is who can't understand Malayalam, will actually try to speak in language he or she understands. So, well, once again, so this was a thought that Sanjeev threw up during when we were in the middle of that. In fact, not in the middle, but at the first stage of this pandemic. And there was a sense of celebration among all of us that, Kerala has done some wonderful job by sort of checkmating this pandemic. And we became the cynosure of the world eyes, as it were, because throughout the international media celebrated us Kerala model. And in fact, I've been offered at least 2-3 books more to write about Kerala model, and now they have all changed their minds, and now they're thinking about. Fortunately, I didn't accept any advance for that. Otherwise, it would have been very difficult for me to find money to refund them. So, in fact, I'm trying to argue that in spite of all this, this apparent kind of setback, Kerala is actually better than everybody. So this argument and this negotiation is going on. So that was a situation when we all thought about bringing out this book with, that was a wonderful idea and absolutely necessary to at that particular point. Not even that, I think it was Albert Camus who said that in this conflict between plague and life, the only gain that man makes is knowledge and memories. And so I think that is the best line that, the great author of the book, the legendary book, The Plague, has given us. So this is what we are creating. We are creating a corpus of memories. We are creating a corpus of knowledge, how we fought, how we failed, what were the problems, what were the major challenges and all. So even though it was at that particular point of time, because I think it is quite absolutely essential that you bring out another book now, Sanjeev, to talk about the the second stage or the third stage. How in that also it gives huge insights into the way one can tackle these issues. Initially there might be positive signs, positive signals, signs of encouragement, but then as it goes on, things can change. It can take a completely different trajectory. And even the traditional, strength may not be enough to fight a pandemic like this. So Kerala itself, Kerala again gives a model, as it were, in fact, a different kind of model. How everything could have been, everything appeared quite manageable in the beginning, which suddenly turned to be different by the second.
Something happened?
I
It's
think
not,
his
it's not
mic-
audible.
And
yes,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
fine.
okay. Now, okay, sir. Now, okay.
okay, I'm not audible.
Okay. Yeah, now, okay, sir.
So did you miss anything?
In between, some seconds.
Okay, no. What I just mentioned was that Sanjeev, it is time for Sanjeev to think about another book, because we need a second book also, the sequel, as it were, because to say how Kerala, that what I was trying to say is that itself is a model to the world, because how everything looked manageable in the beginning can actually turn the other way at some point of time. In fact, Kerala model itself is a story about this, shuttling between the strengths and the weaknesses, the challenges and the opportunities and things like that. The Kerala economic or social models, which looked very, very good in the beginning. Later, at some point of time, the limits to Kerala model came out. And now, thirdly, we have again been rescued by some providential kind of help from the Gulf money and all those things, by which we have already salvaged Kerala model to some extent. In the 1980s, I remember, when we were all studying economics, the most important topic at that particular point of time was that how Kerala model is going to crumble and collapse by the 80s because of the economic, the huge stagnation that Kerala faced, how Kerala model has become unsustainable and things like that. But what happened in the late 80s was suddenly this bonanza from the Gulf, the boom from the desert, happened, the oil boom, and the Kerala model got salvaged to some extent. And now again, we are again facing a different situation where the Gulf again looks a vanishing dream. And again, Kerala model might face some kind of new problems. So I think this entire story about the Kerala model and the COVID itself also runs parallel to the story of the legendary Kerala model. And so I would like to speak something about the impact of COVID in our realm, that is the world of media. And just 2 or 3 points, then I'll stop. And the most important point is that suddenly, the most important impact of COVID has been to I don't know whether it's right to say, but it's a positive in the sense that there has been a huge increase in terms of in the number of viewers, number of readers, all those things, because that the legacy media has been going through such a difficult, such a terrible patch right before the COVID, because for various reasons, because of social medias and this great preponderance and all. So the legacy media was in its last legs, as it were, as many doomsayers actually predicted. And suddenly, what happened that COVID actually created a huge increase in viewership, in the increase in circulation and all those things. So suddenly, this history, the last 20-25 years of print going down and down and down, suddenly print, not just print but television as well, going down and down, and suddenly was actually saved by this pandemic in that respect, in the sense that suddenly a demand for news consumption actually increased. That is the first point, that 4 to 5, not the number of the expansion of the universe, that's the viewership universe, has been about 100 to 150%. So the second impact is that in spite of all these things, it has not translated into money. Everybody knows that the economic decline that India or the world has been facing, even before the COVID onset, it got completely aggravated. And now we are, as everybody knows, that we are complete shambles, the entire economy. And now that has actually directly impacted the media so badly that it is so difficult for at least 75 to 80% of media organizations even to survive. So that is going to be a major setback to not just the world of media, but democracy as well. So it is so difficult for media organizations to sustain themselves. So many journalists have been in the streets, they have been sent out from their jobs. Many organizations have closed down. So overall, the world of media is facing a huge, unprecedented amount of, not just crisis. In fact, kind of a implosion is happening, in the sense that, at least 35% of the media organizations have already closed down all over the world. So so this is a kind of a contradictory situation. Until now, we all thought that increase in viewership, increase in circulation will automatically corresponded, will be translated into increase in revenue, increase in economic well-being, and all, which has not happened. There is an increase in viewership, but no money. There's no advertising, revenue. Nobody is advertising. Those people who have committed, huge money are not paying. So it's all natural. So this is an economic crisis that I don't know how many media organizations will be able to survive. And even the top organization, if they're not retrenched, there have been huge cuts in salaries, payments. So people are actually, moving out from this profession. And and as you know, in India also about 80 to 85 to 90% media organizations are small or medium organizations. And the crisis is much more for them. Unlike in the top, in Kerala, for instance, one or two or three television channels are paying, decent salaries. And even for them, the salary cuts or the prospects of a salary cuts, or even no extensions, compulsory retirements, all those things have become a reality. Now, the third impact is that the way it has changed, transformed the content structure of the media, because until COVID, or at least after the COVID, there has been a steady decrease in the interest or attention for news, which is not, immediate, in the sense that extended news analysis, news discussions, current affairs programs, and things like that have been facing a huge setback in terms of ratings. So people, that is why you see that almost all channels are resorting to this 100 news syndrome, 50 news, 100 news, 150 news, how to overtake that. So this is actually, this was something which the regional channels started, but now that all the English channels have almost a similar kind of bulletins. So I think the bulletins, the kind of one-liner stories have completely pushed out the extended, or the discussions, the debates, the wider angles, the wider picture. So you cannot get into a serious discussion on anything, because there is the attention span of the viewer has come down like anything, because everybody is looking for something which is so brief, just 1 line, 2 line, 3 line. So I think this is going to create quite a big problem for many media organizations in terms of sacrificing depth and details to the headlines. So this is something which we have all the program producers are actually out of their jobs. They don't have anything to do. They don't have half-an-hour programs to do, because nobody wants. So what happens is, even for sort of detailed discussions, even on diseases, like even on a debate or a discussion which is more than 15 minutes, 20 minutes on a television channel, have this this challenge of being losing out in ratings. So what most television channels are doing, that we're all dispensing with discussions, depths, and all those things, and to replace them with this 100 news or 25 news or 50 news or whatever it is. So I think this is actually already media critics have been saying that televisions are, it's called, by nature, it's too superfluous, too sort of, hovercraft kind of journalism. They are only touching at the cosmetics, it is too skin deep. There's no discussions, debates, and things like that. Television is all about bites, sound bites. But now this actually has aggravated situation. Now every television channel, and I don't know about newspapers as such, but television channels are doing away with debates and discussions. And so I think the last point is that if this is going to continue, what would be the future? So television economically, and in terms of content, in terms of the I mean, the advertisement revenue I already mentioned. All these are going to create, huge challenges for the future of the media. If 2021, if Indian economy is contracting, like they are saying that 24% contraction in national in GDP, the way that media world is going to sort of collapse or to contract is something which is beyond my imagination. But as I know, as shown many times in the past, there could be some kinds of possibilities by which the media will find itself as escape routes or whatever, because human beings, as everybody knows, cannot survive without communicating with each other. So some kind of reinventing, some kind of reimagining of the world of media is likely to happen. But then what it is quite uncertain as the COVID situation. You don't know what is going to happen to the coronavirus, whether it's going to disappear, whether we are going to sort of kick it out with vaccines. Nobody knows when, nobody knows which is the vaccine is going to happen. So everybody thought that August, this month, September, October would be the time when we are going to see the first vaccines out, but now it's again postponed to March. So complete uncertainty, unprecedented uncertainty in the world. So the way it has reordered our lives, the way it has transformed our lives, never happened in the past. So the world of media is just part of this whole scenario, and you don't know what is going to happen. So I think the media thinkers and media scholars and students, and generally in terms of people who support democracy, should suggest ways, should find ways to help media to get over this crisis. And I hope, and I'm sure that will happen. Thank you, Sanjeev.
Thank you, Sri MGR. That was a bird's eye view on the social dimension of the pandemic, as well as a critical observations on how the media practices are changing every day, every now and then during this pandemic period. Now, Srimati KK Shailaja teacher, Honorable Minister for Health and Social Justice, has joined us. I have been acquainted with teacher for a long time, since my television journalism years. I am very happy that her smiling face is in front of my screen right now. And in fact, Dr. Tharoor, he was a bit busy today because he had to participate in at least more than five webinars, I think. So he joined us, and he had given his speech, and in fact, he received the book virtually in your absence from yourself. So I request Srimati KK Shailaja teacher, our beloved and respected Minister for Health and Social Justice, to say a few words as well as to release the book. Srimati KK Shailaja teacher ka Adarapurvam, Snehapurvam, Swagatham.
Yes. ഇതില് മലയാളം ഇല്ലാത്ത ആളുകളുണ്ട് അല്ലേ?
Yes, കുറച്ച് പേരുണ്ട്. Okay, teacher സൗകര്യം പോലെ, no problem.
Okay. Respected Sri S.R. Sanjeev, Sri M.G. Radhakrishnan, Sri Joy A. Sakaria, Sri Nidin Kalol, Sri B. Srijan, Sri Nandagopal Rajan, Sri M.S. Harikumar, Sri Lal Mohan P., Sri Lakshmi Pradeep, Sri Muhammad Ali Nilliuladil, Sri Shaju P.P., Sri Abdul Munir V., Sri C.S. Venkadeshwaran, Sri Damodar Prasad, and my dear brothers and sisters. As you all know, this virus is a novel one, S.R. Sanjeev stated in his preface that this coronavirus is a novel one in all meaning. And the book is also, I think this is also a novel one. The novelty is that the book doesn't explain about the number and that kind of thing, but it explains a novel thing, that what is the effect of the virus in the social sector, and that is the most interesting part I feel about this book. I didn't go through completely, but I read the preface and I read some of the articles, and I feel something in my mind that what is happening in the human being actually. The people, I definitely I think that who read the book, they can take into their mind that actually what is going on in the human community. Most of the people are not aware of this change or this what is affecting the humanity as a whole, and what is the dangerous thing behind the virus. They are not aware of that. Some people are taking it as a common infectious disease and common thing, and they are not aware about the severity of this virus. I think I faced two things like this. Not two, so many things are there. So many infectious diseases are there, and health minister definitely have to face all of these things in each and every occasion. But two novel things I happen to face during my during this tenure. One is Nipah virus attack, that is at Calicut, and that was completely a newly emerging zoonosis. And when I astonished, the Nipah came to India, that is in Kerala, and I inquired all about that. I am not familiar with that virus at that time. No one are familiar about that virus at that time. And we inquired, I and my health secretary and my staff, my director, and everyone inquired about that. We happen to know that it is a new virus, and it occurred 4 or 5 places in whole of the world. It first occurred in Malaysia, in a place called Sungai Nipah. And from there, it got that name, Nipah virus. And it is a killer virus, mortality rate is too high, but the spreading rate is low. That is the peculiarity of that virus, but mortality rate is too high. But at that time, we acted well, and our preparedness and our active doing helped us very much to contain that virus within a short span of time, in a short space. And the whole world looked at us. I didn't imagine that I got an appreciation from the Baltimore Virology Lab or like that at that time. We are working sincerely to save the lives of the people. That was only intention at that time. But after that, the scientists discussed about that. How can a small state that is not economically fit, and this kind of a small state, how can they contain that virus in a short span of time? They discussed with us. I said that it is nothing but we have a centralized planning and the full support of the society and the sincere work of the health department, the ASHA worker to professors of the medical college. They worked hard to contain that thing. And that was a great experience. And next year also we anticipated that virus will come, and what we have to do at that time. We conducted mock drill after that, after 2018, 2019 also we conducted mock drill. If Nipah came, what we have to do at that time. Each and every hospital conducted mock drill. And 2019 also, one patient got Nipah virus and admitted in one private hospital in Ernakulam. At once we rushed there and we isolated him properly, and no transmission occurred at that time, and we succeed to contain at that time also. 2020 also we are expecting Nipah virus, but we are taking every measures to contain at the same time. When it occurs, we will contain it, that we will isolate them and give proper treatment at that same time. And remedies to this also came. When we heard that a potential virus is spreading in Wuhan, China, and at that time I feel some worries in my heart, because there are so many medical students studying in Wuhan University in China. Some of them came to me previously to get some internship, etc. in Kerala Health Department. So I'm sure that some students will return to Kerala during the season. And I called my health principal secretary and we discussed it together. Dr. Rajan Kobrakade IAS said that, Madam, we should have to prepare earlier, and let us start our preparation. At once we called our RRT, Rapid Response Team, and also we opened our control room in Trivandrum, and also we passed the all the knowledge we got from other places to our district level officers, and we opened district control room and we start our work. We started training also. That time no one returned here. January 24, 25, 26. 27th, as we expected, some flights came from Wuhan and we got 3 positive cases. January 30th, we got our first case, and February 2nd and 3rd, we got other 2 cases tested positive for this COVID-19. And we isolated them properly and treated them. We have a very good strategy for that. Kerala strategy is correct at that time, and this time also that strategy is very perfect, we can say. Though very perfect means we can contain these things all of a sudden. No, we cannot. No one cannot, because this is a peculiar virus, as you know. This is a peculiar thing. But comparing to other places, our strategy is good. That is this trace, quarantine, test, isolate, and treat. That is going on here. The first of all, we have to trace the virus and the affected person and to quarantine them properly and test them. And test them means testing of all, test, nothing else. And first of all, WHO and other part of the world said that test all people. No need of that. We have to test the symptomatic people. We have to test the risk, high risk contacts, and we have to test the vulnerable people. There is a choice. There is a categorization for testing and a priority. We have to decide the priority. Kerala is doing that, and Kerala is testing properly. Someone is crying that the test is too low, test is too low. We cannot say so. We are testing properly, strategic and scientific manner. We can increase the test. We should have it too. But increasing means not testing everybody. I'm not saying all these things in an inauguration of or releasing of a book. No need to explain each and everything. But the book inspired me to tell something about this this virus. And the first part, we contained the virus, and the whole world appreciates us. Before May 3rd and after March 24th. Before March 24th, so many people, about 1 lakh people's expatriates returned to Kerala before March 24th. And March 24th, the central government declared lockdown, complete lockdown. That was a good thing. And we get some space to build our health system capacity and to train our staff, and some preparation that helped us very much. No one came at that time after March 24th. But after May 3rd, again people came to Kerala and returned back because lockdown lifted, and by air, by water, by road, and by rail, the thousands and thousands of people returned to Kerala from the hotspots. At that time, the virus spread to the all over the world, and all countries become the epicenter, and people are coming from that place. We cannot deny them because they are Keralites. We have to accept them, receive them. We received them, we welcomed them. But out of them, so many people are carriers of this virus, and they contracted the peoples here also. And that way, it become, the graph again become shooting up. And we flattened the graph more than anything. At that time, BBC called me, and the Guardian from Guardian called me. Some people are saying that it is a PR work. I don't know everything. I am not familiar with the BBC or Guardian. I am not familiar with any person. But as a health minister, they called me. I explained what we done here, and they appreciate for that work. That's all. At that time also, I said, we cannot predict that it is the end. So many people will return back to Kerala once we lift the all these restrictions, and at that time the graph will shoot up. I told them at that time itself. That happened, and more than 10 lakh people returned here, and again the gap should become higher, and also the transmission also increased, and we got more cases of transmission this time. From Tamil Nadu, through the local paths, they entered to the villages and stayed there and returned to Tamil Nadu again. We cannot identify. From check post we can identify them, but we came through the village paths, etc., and some clusters formed here and there. And ours is a consumerist state. We want vegetables, we want even fish from outside, and the carriers are coming, and the drivers may be positive, and wherever they unloaded these things, that market become contaminated, and from that market clusters occurred. That time also our cluster management strategy we applied, and that hardship, I can't explain that hardship, but because human resource scarcity is there. Our department is suffering too much. They have to look after the non-COVID issues also. So many patients are there. At the same time, they have to work on this COVID sector also. But we are doing that. And people are asking, why are you appointing more staff this time? We are willing. Amidst the financial crisis, the Honorable CM and the Honorable Finance Minister give me permission to appoint new staffs, but more than 10,000 registered in our COVID brigade. But when we trying to appoint them, no one is coming. We can't say no one, few people are coming. Others are not coming because they are afraid of this virus, Inside the department, it is their duty. They are doing their duty. They are afraid, but they are doing their duty. But outside, they are coming. They are not coming to work for the COVID sector or hospital itself. And the healthcare workers caught COVID. It is not from the COVID positive ward. PPE kit, they are using personal protection equipments and they are working there. Very few people got infected from the COVID positive part, but most of them were infected outside the non-COVID part. Someone are coming with fever and headache and not knowing they have COVID, and that doctor, nurse, etc. are getting COVID. I am not explaining more, but we are fighting a severe fight. We have severe war. We are in front of a war. We are in war front. We can say so. And the soldiers are fighting. They are using all weapons. We are collecting all weapons. We are fighting. I don't know whether we succeed or not. But I have enthusiasm that we are doing more than other places. Now the mortality rate is 0.44 in Kerala. That is the lowest rate throughout the world because of this hard work done by ASHA workers to professors. They are the real heroes. If anyone give an award to me or appreciation to me, I cannot take it because I cannot take it alone. It is not for me. It is not. It is for the team, entire team, for working, not only the healthcare workers or health department staffs, but also for the police and for the local self-government, etc. We are giving to them. I want to conclude this thing because this book, the first, the introduction, I become nervous or I become inspired, but I didn't know what I want to. Sanjeev's these statements, some words I want to call. You give the name as infodemic. Yes, infodemic is going on. Information and epidemic. What is the information about the epidemic? Is it correct or not? No one knows. Something we can take into our mind and we can discuss and we can confirm from amidst the newses, the vast amount of newses coming day by day, suggestions, news, etc., studies, etc. Something is not correct. Something is, I think, false beliefs and etc. is there. Someone said that cow duff and that kind of things will cure COVID. And someone is saying that if you shout slogans, go Corona, that will help to contain this virus. What foolishness is going on in our society? This time we know what immature is our society in some parts. And Kerala is better, but I cannot say completely we are civilized or that scientific, we cannot say so. Unscientific things are in Kerala also. False beliefs are in Kerala also. We have to fight with the virus and we have to fight with this kind of information, false informations. At the same time, we are getting good informations also, which are helping, definitely helping in our work. And the rapid spread of information, both accurate and inaccurate. Sanjeev used that words. That is the correct word. We are getting rapid spread of information. Not only spread of virus, along with the virus, the information is also spreading. And amongst it is correct and when inaccurate is also there. And the society changed completely. The change, it is very cruel change, we can say so, or frightening change, we can say so. The Sanjeev is saying that a health risk has created a new world social order with no socialization at all. Yes, we all want socialization, but this created the anti-socialization of the world that is going on here. And what is the word meaning that is changed? The nature is opened and the air is clean, more cleaned now, because the vehicles are few in the road, etc. But no one can get that fresh air to, no one can breathe that air because everyone is wearing masks. Sanjeev pointed out that thing. That is fantastic, you know. I think that is correct. We are all wearing masks. We cannot feel the fresh air. Air is becoming fresh, but we cannot feel that fresh air. That is the. So many things are there in the first para itself. It is fantastic, Sanjeev. I appreciate you for this kind of a good book, and all the others. Even the last part, that cartoons also is telling us some stories about this difficult situation. I am not elaborating these things. I didn't read it completely. I will read it completely. I got this book yesterday, day before yesterday, and because of this hurry-burry works, I cannot sit somewhere and read it properly. So I cannot apply my mind in it completely. Sorry for that. I appreciate all the authors because you have done a fantastic work, and this will be helpful to the human beings, the society, and future students also. This is a novel thing. This helps us to fight against this novel virus, this peculiar virus, and this gives us enthusiasm, and this shows some ways to proceed, how human being can together fight this war. And I am thankful to you. Definitely, as a minister, a health minister, I want to express my thanks to all the authors and who collected all these good stories, good writings, good these articles together. Sanjeev has done a very fruitful work and fantastic work. With these words, I am going to release these books, and the book is released.
Thank you, teacher. Now all the participants know that why teacher is so dear to us, because she is like sitting just behind you, just beside you, and talking to you like from somebody very near to you. And I am very much thankful to for the pain that you have took to read out some portions from the book, and of course you have illuminated us with the intensity of the fight that you are pursuing with the help of a lot of health workers, with the health workers across Kerala. And once the pandemic is raging, and once the battle is getting prolonged, the fight is becoming more and more arduous, and we are having so much of pain in these days. And of course, I am sure that we will come out of this maybe in another 6 months or so. We will come out of this, and we will be thriving with reinvigorated energy and soul. Thank you, Srimati K.K. Shailaja teacher. വളരെ നന്ദി. വളരെ പ്രിയപ്പെട്ട, വളരെ സ്നേഹത്തോടു കൂടിയിട്ടുള്ള വാക്കുകളായിരുന്നു. ഞങ്ങളെല്ലാവരും ഭയങ്കരമായിട്ട് അത് ഓരോ വാചകങ്ങളും കേൾക്കുകയായിരുന്നു. അത് ഉള്ളിൽ തട്ടുന്ന രീതിയിൽ ടീച്ചർ ആ കാര്യങ്ങൾ മുഴുവൻ വിശദീകരിച്ചു. എന്തായാലും ഈ തിരക്കിന്റെ ഒരുപാട് തിരക്കുണ്ട് ടീച്ചർക്ക്. അതിൻ്റെ ഇടയിൽ ടീച്ചർ ഞങ്ങളുടെ കൂടെ വന്നതിലും ഈ പുസ്തകം റിലീസ് ചെയ്തതിലും എല്ലാവരുടെ പേരിലും, ഞങ്ങളുടെ എല്ലാ ഓഥേഴ്സിന്റെ പേരിൽ മാത്രമല്ല, ഈ വെബിനാറിൽ പങ്കെടുക്കുന്ന എല്ലാവരുടെ പേരിലും, മാറി വാനസ് കോളേജിന്റെ പേരിലും ഒക്കെ വളരെ ഹൃദയപൂർവ്വം നന്ദി അറിയിക്കുന്നു. താങ്ക് യു വെരി മച്ച്.
സഞ്ജീവ്, ഒരു ക്ഷമാപണമുണ്ട്. എനിക്ക് ഇവിടെ കുറച്ച് ഗുരുതരമായിട്ടുള്ള പ്രശ്നങ്ങളുണ്ട്. അതുകൊണ്ട് അത് നേരിടേണ്ടത് കൊണ്ട് എനിക്ക് നിങ്ങളൊക്കെ പറയുന്നത് കേൾക്കണം എന്ന് ആഗ്രഹം ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. ഞാൻ അത് റെക്കോർഡ് ചെയ്യാൻ സമ്മതിക്കുമെങ്കിൽ റെക്കോർഡ് ചെയ്തിട്ട് ഞാൻ കേട്ടോളാം. പിന്നെ അപ്പൊ ഞാൻ എൻ്റെ ഒരു അടുത്ത മീറ്റിംഗ് ഉണ്ട്. ശ്രീ MGR സമ്മതിക്കുമെന്ന് കരുതുന്നു. പിന്നെ ഞാനൊന്ന് കിറ്റ് ചെയ്തോട്ടെ.
ഷുവർ ടീച്ചർ. ടീച്ചർ ഒരു കുഴപ്പമില്ല. ഞാൻ പിന്നീട് അതിന്റെ ലിങ്ക് ഒക്കെ ഷെയർ ചെയ്തോളാം. സൗകര്യം പോലെ സമയത്തോളം
കേട്ടോളാം കേട്ടോ.
ഓക്കെ. താങ്ക് യു വെരി മച്ച്. താങ്ക് യു. So the book has been released. Now we should move on to the next part of our webinar, COVIDian conversations. The conversation is going to happen between Sri Damodar Prasad, my dear friend, Director, Electronic Multimedia Research Center, University of Calicut, and Sri EP Unni. Once you just give a glance to the cartoon that he is drawing, because he is drawing for the Indian Express Delhi, so we are not fortunate to see the cartoons in printed version most of the time in Kerala, because we are getting a different Indian Express here. So you know, the intensity, the layered meanings that are actually woven in these cartoons in various dimensions of human understanding. So may I request Sri Damodar Prasad and Sri EP Unni to begin the COVIDian conversations. Sri Damodar Prasad.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Good morning or good afternoon to all. So the COVIDian sounds like Kafkaesque. The COVIDian term, to me, I mean, sounds like Kafkaesque, because something, kind of a labyrinthian situation, where we are actually trapped in. So, I mean, I am talking, this conversation is taking place after a kind of a talk by the minister. And towards the end of her talk, it was a kind of a relief that at least some of us felt, I know we felt, when he was talking about in a pleasant way about the kind of infodemic, about the cow dung cure and things like that, which we all, which we all came to know about through the WhatsApp University. Actually, there was a cartoon by EP Unni on this cow dung cure, which came during the lockdown period. So, I mean, in this forum itself, we have several generations of journalists. Some senior journalists, like a very senior journalist, MGR, Joe Sakaria. Then you have the next generation, Sanjeev. And EP Unni actually belonged to a generation before MGR, I think so. So he's the senior most, the veteran journalist and a veteran, journalist here in this forum. So I did not introduce EP Unni. That would be kind of I introduced to the two generation. I mean, the generation of MGR and Joe Sakaria and also Sanjeev. Maybe for the new generation who are actually doing the mass communication in your college, in other places. Some of them may not be knowing, because the issue is that now the cartoons, EP Unni, his cartoon is coming in Express, which is not accessible. Only the online version is accessible in our state. The print version, we don't get EP Unni's cartoon. But even then, EP Unni is, I mean, for the mass communication journalists and students, EP Unni is one of the prominent cartoonists, political cartoonists from Kerala. And he belongs to, I mean, a generation after Ovision's generation. Though he has worked closely with Abu Abraham, I mean, closely in the sense that he has worked with, with that generation of cartoonists, Abu Abraham, Kuti, Ovision. So, and he also has done a few books, sketches on Food Kochi. I mean, it's these are informations that we can, which are available on net, which I don't want to, which everybody can access through the net. But I would single, I mean, I would like to introduce EP Unni as the kind of, shall I say, kind of an intellectual cartoonist, in the sense that he has the cartoon is has a different take, because the themes that he deals in his cartoon, which are more or less a different type of, which has a different take from the. I don't want to keep him to keep him away from the other cartoonists, but the mostly you can see in case of lockdown cartoons, you can see he deals with the economic aspects, the issues of economy, issues of political economy, things like that. No, it may not be, he may not go with the very, compared to some other cartoonists in real, with the popular kind of, very, very populistic, articulations, but a bit more thoughtful. You may have to, the cartoon demands kind of, revisiting, kind of a relook at it. So there's certainly a different sort of, and this cartoon, I would say, belongs to actually to the generation of cartoonists of Ovidian and his predecessors. So with that, I will start my conversation. I welcome Unnisar. Because in this, this online forum, actually, I cannot see him because I have to actually this online platform. I know that he is present somewhere in this platform because I have to scroll down or I have to see. Actually, I can't see his face. No, let me see. I think Unnisar, please unmute yourself. So only then the conversation.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes.
Fine.
So I will start with a few questions. Then we'll open the forum to participants so that everyone can have a conversation.
Damodar, I can see you well. Just cue me when I should answer questions.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Hi.
Sir, I will begin with a few questions. Then we will open the forum to all the participants so they can also converse with you. So I will begin with the question about the political cartooning in India. I mean the sort of the legacy of political cartooning in India, and where you locate yourself among the political cartoonists in India. I mean, starting from Shankar. I mean, many of the as you were saying about the cartoonists have migrated to Delhi, other places, and doing cartoons in the national dailies. You started with, I think, Hindu. So, tell us about the generations, the preceding generations of cartoonists like Ovidian, Abu Abraham, and where you locate yourself, in that amongst them.
Yeah, the cartooning is I grew up looking at the work of people like Vijayan, Abu, and also the earlier ones like Shankar. Because I used to get the Shankar weekly in my hometown. Shankar weekly used to bring a bunch of cartoons by some of the finest cartoons in the country. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yeah, you are very much audible.
Okay, fine. Then the Hindu used to carry Vijayan's cartoons twice a week or 4 times a week. The Indian Express used to carry Abu's cartoons 6 days a week. And Vijayan was bilingual. Vijayan used to fire away from the Mathrubhumi also. Another 3-4 cartoons a week in Malayalam. So this was a fine pair of cartooning I grew up on. And Aravindan was drawing for the Mathrubhumi weekly. So this is the influence. This is the umbrella under which I grew up. So you will find the influence of all these cartoonists in my work. This is how all cartoonists anywhere in the world used to learn, because before the days of the internet, this was virtual Gurukula for all cartoonists. You learn from the work of masters who preceded. And these happen to be fine masters. So whatever I've been able to get out of them has been absolutely great stuff. Because it was Vijayan, it was between Vijayan, Ovi Vijayan, Rajendra Puri, and Abu Abraham that something called the editorial cartoon really got saved in India. Otherwise, it was a funny, commentative, maybe poster-like, very political, no less political, but where it became a newspaper art as an editorial cartoon in the real sense of terms. This happened thanks largely to, I'm not saying only to, largely to this trio of cartoonists, Rajendra Puri, Abu Abraham, and Ovi Vijayan. Of the 3, we used to get the 2 of them here in the south. And Rajendra Puri published a book on the split in the Congress party called the Crisis of Conscience. That book became available. In fact, that book must have changed hands so many times. I got a copy of the book that it is soon in tatters, and we have to keep rebinding the book and distribute it among our college mates, friends. Also, interestingly, Kerala had a very aware reading public. No cartooning can happen in a vacuum. It's not just enough for a person to be able to draw. You also need a good reader. In the 70s, 60s, and 70s, Kerala was a highly politicized state. All of that is good for cartooning.
Yeah. And I was reading, some of you may have read Gopalakrishna's interview with Unisar, in the recent issue of Bhasha Bhoshni. So it's exclusive interview. It's an interview about Ovision's cartoon. Ovision, we have appreciated Ovision as a writer, but as a cartoonist, we know Ovision as a cartoonist. We have seen his cartoon, but as a cartoonist, maybe not. We have, at least in our context, perhaps he has not got much appreciation as a cartoonist. But Unisar was talking about. So I would, even Vision from Palakkad, I would say, I don't want to call it influence, but how was your interaction with Vijayan? With his political, about Gopalakrishnan was asking about the exceptional nature of Vijayan's cartoon, and you were actually elaborating on that. So it's not about the influence. Perhaps your sketches are very distinct in that sense, but the interaction or the kind of intellectual conversation that you had with Vijayan, how has it enabled in your work?
No, it must have been the same as that of any other reader, because we were reading, the whole of Kerala was reading Vijayan. Vijayan was read as a writer. Before that, Vijayan used to be read in my house when I was very small, basically as a cartoon. I remember my parents discussing his cartoons and showing them to me. When I was very young, I couldn't make it out, but I found the drawings very nice, very funny. Like all kids find anything comic funny. Nice. But Vijayan was basically seen as a cartoonist in the 60s, and later he established himself as a writer. And Vijayan, for us in the 70s, again, was a major writer, certainly, but was also a major cartoonist. And we were reading him live. Now we are going back and looking at this cartoon. It's very important for you to follow. It's like following a sportsman live. When you've actually seen Pele on the field, it's very different from watching a recorded version of Pele. The cartoon is like sport, and it's very live. So we have followed him day after day, commenting on issues as they evolve. So that Vijayan is a very powerful influence on any political person. You don't have to be a cartoonist. Most readers. He's also controversial because he has this knack of provoking you, getting into a rhetorical issue, creating an argument. He's quintessentially the argumentative Indian that we talk about today. You know what Amartya Sen talked about. He's quintessentially the most argumentative Malayali I have seen, especially among the cartoons. He can provoke an argument. That's why he's often misinterpreted, misread. Because he'll also do it serially. Because those were days, as you were talking about, those were days when you could prolong a theme. There was certain threads that people followed, like democracy, fundamental rights, basic structure of the constitution, constitution itself, civil rights, liberties, various issues like the socialism. Are you for socialism or against it? Are you for violent kind of transition? Are you for reform? All these issues were politically at the back of everybody's mind in the 70s.
So, it isn't, you're talking about, so I will take a jump cut about the political cartooning in the, current period. So, when you talk about when you started your political cartooning and the generation before you, they were actually working in, as you told, in a kind of an ideological condition, where there's a strong ideological context. Today, we are actually working in a kind of ideological vacuum. Where do we don't have that kind of ideological rigor in argumentation and in the journalistic person. We don't have that kind of editors also who are ideologically very very rigorous. So in that way, the today's cartoon is happening in a kind of ideological vacuum. This has led to many cartoonists taking kind of very working ideological vacuum. Many cartoonists doing, what shall I say, not so politically, enabling cartoons. So, but you have this experience of working in a period when this ideological rigor was, this ideological conference was very manifest. And today, so how would you, differentiate between the political cartoon in these two generations? I mean, political and vis-a-vis that generation today also. About today's political cartooning.
Yeah, since I started working, I can't see, I'm not academic enough to, I don't have the academic rigor to look at it the way you look at it, but I can look at it as a process because that's what we went through as a work practice. When I started working, I started, for the first time, I started commenting on the Janata government because already a major change of regime had taken place, very dramatic, very, very important change in India. First time a non-Congress virtual coalition was ruling the country. It was without the Congress party ruling the country for all those years. Since then, there has been, the politics has also become multi-centric, more federal. It's not just one stream. It's not just one stream of ideological shifts. Various ways things started drifting. You cannot say all of them were negative. For instance, the politics under Nehru was naturally Delhi-centric because Nehru was Nehru. Later, it showed some signs of, devolution of powers and so on, and even at least within the Congress party, whatever it was, it showed multi-centric kind of power system. But nothing happened. Indira Gandhi came, and again it became a Delhi-centric, person-centric politics. This Janata was the first major shift out of that, and we did see some signs of federalism. Of course, these are the small positive things that happen. Lots of negative things eventually follow. And we are talking about the things, what we call the non-ideological drift. It's very much there. We have gone through many, many decades of that. Cartooning has gone through a similar place in the US also. In the 90s, it became impossible for cartoonists to caricature anybody because they thought that the country was being run by clowns. And they said, how do you caricature a clown? It's already a caricature. And that kind of a thing, we have come pretty close to those stages now. But again, if you look at the global situation, or also you look at India a little closely, I think the major themes are coming back to COVID is a good example. Thanks to COVID, we have had to rethink on very many basic issues. Even the most right-wing governments have started thinking about welfare reform. So there is a rethinking, there is at least thinking in terms of themes. It's slowly coming back.
About the lockdown cartoons, I was while observing the cartoons that came in now, because I couldn't see this in Express, so I got this PDF versions of your cartoon. While at the same time, I was looking at the Times of India cartoon, the Hindu cartoon, lockdown cartoon. This particular cartoon that which Sanjeev has given us the cover, the Epic of Compassion. It was a I would say it was a kind of very I don't know. I was so excited by seeing that because it opened to us a sharp critique, in a kind of very incisive critique on the way the government is dealing with the lockdown. There was a migrant crisis also. People fleeing from the home. That was that cartoon actually. That led me to think about the cartoon, how the cartoons actually was representing the lockdown, the issues of lockdown, concerns of the lockdown. So I thought that many of the cartoons were representing the issues, but you had a different take. But you are closely looking at the economic aspect, the political economic aspect about the kind of the violation of rights, things like that. Actually at the same time looking at certain the international issues that were happening at the same time. In the after the lockdown, I have only used the first phase of the lockdown cartoon here, but in the second phase you could see actually there are cartoons on China where in Samarbadi, I think Sabarmati Modi and Trump meeting, and because the Khadi mask will be can export it from China. I think that was the caption. So the captioning itself, that was very incisive. that led me to think about the lockdown cartoons. Actually, if Sajeev could play those cartoons, it would be very interesting. The lockdown cartoons, the first wave lockdown cartoons.
I can see one already.
Yeah.
I can see one on the screen. Yes.
So, I mean, could you just, sir, tell us about it? I don't want to confine to lockdown cartoon because this is the kind of, although it came in during the lockdown period, actually a cartoon have this focus, very close looking at the political economy. I mean, the aspects like that. So, you explain, I mean, tell us about that somehow.
No, see, I talk about the lockdown cartoon itself. See, when there is a major health disaster like this, it's very difficult to cartoon for the simple reason that this kind of personal health misery doesn't lend itself to cartoon. Cartooning is a lighter form of, or secondly, it's a lighter form, something supposed to raise some kind of a laugh. People laugh or criticize in many ways, but it's not very easy to contain that kind of misery in a cartoon. But then you have to comment on it. People have commented on it earlier also, through miserable times, through riots, people of cartoon, through wars, people of cartoon, through the great collapse of the world economy in 1959, the New York Stock Exchange, people of cartoon. One second, somebody at the door. People of cartoon through those hard times. So I continue to cartoon, but I found that there's one aspect of the crisis that can be commented upon, which is what the government is doing to the economy. And I was actually appalled by the way the government was completely blind to the plight of migrants. And migrants are I have lived in Delhi for many years, and they were very much part of your life. And when you looked out of any window in Delhi, or anyone living in Delhi, the chances are that in about 3 minutes you will fight a migrant. We are all migrants. Cartoonists are famously migrants. There's even a cartoon theory by a theorist among cartoonists that the cartooning itself as an art, migrants are. Some of the finest cartoonists in the world have been migrants. David Lowe was a New Zealander who went and settled down in London and became a cartoonist. Oliphant migrated from Australia to US and became its greatest cartoonist, Victor Pulitzer. Our own Arcade Excellent migrated from Mysore to Mumbai. Shankar was legendary migrant from Trivandrum to Delhi and established political cartooning. So this migrancy, the point is, how come your rulers in Delhi, they could have just looked out of the window and realized that the first people who are going to get hit are the migrants. There was complete invisibilizing of migrant labor. This will be the biggest disaster of this lockdown. And we continue to, deny of that and so on. I mean, this I thought I was pursuing. This is one of the biggest motivations for me to do these cartoons. Something that is so obviously manageable was not managed.
Interesting in this lockdown cartoon, just before the lockdown started, after you can see mask appearing and very nuanced things appearing. So very close observation of the cartoon of the society, things changing in society. Once it started, in the initially there was no mask, and the mask appearing. Very nuanced little things that the cartoonist with its eye observes in society. This is the very interesting I observed. Second about, sir, I will end with this question open the floor about the captioning. This is a very interesting thing about your cartoon, captioning. About the captions that use the captioning. It's something recalls you about Vijay also, the very politically kind of captioning. There is a sharp political, very solid political content to the caption. So about I don't find. Actually, many of the cartoonists don't find that kind of a captioning. But you have captions are very incisive and politically, with the solid content.
You want me to comment on?
Yeah.
I grew up in a campus culture which was known for sloganeering and pamphleteering in the 60s and 70s. So, and also, I mean, I was used to Vijay and Abu. They were all great writers, gag writers, so-called gag writers. They wrote their captions extremely well. Abu was more situational, so the captions by themselves may not have been so portable. But Vijay was sometimes like a one-liner, you could remember the captions. Very powerful. Vijay was a very powerful writer. So the point is, why I have to depend more on the captions also because of my paper, because my paper is a small paper, in the sense not a very thick newspaper, because it doesn't have 50 pages or 58 pages, it's a very thin bunch of newsprint sheets. So we don't have too much space. So I don't do a display cartoon except once a week on the edit page. Otherwise, my cartoons are all pocket cartoons that appear on the front page. They want to use the cartoon on the front page, but they can't give you much space. So what I did was I converted the conventional pocket cartoon into a bonsai edit cartoon. What do you do when you shrink an edit
There's
cartoon?
interruption. I
Very
think there is interruption, no?
very
Sanjeev?
editorial.
Interruption, no?
No, I think somebody has come to his home. One second. He's joining back. Please wait, Damodar. One second.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm back.
Yes, sir. I have few other questions on troll, etc. about the current, different kinds of internet, social media. No, I wouldn't say it, cartoon. It's not certainly not cartoons, but I will ask that later. No, we'll open the floor to other participants to have interaction with you.
Damodar Prasad, let me intervene for a moment. B. Sridhan has raised his hand. I think, Sridhan, you unmute yourself and you can raise your point, please.
So I will mute my.
Srijan, are you there? Srijan has left. I don't know. He's not. He has raised his hand earlier. And Mohammad Ali sir was mentioning about political cartooning and the one-liner news in the chat room. In fact, this angle was this aspect was elaborated by P. sir. He was referring to the political cartooning and the nuances of doing it. I think, Damodar, if you can conclude this, move
at least
on.
two, I mean, one or two questions you can take, no, then we will conclude. There are not two questions, so that I know there is you have to finish it in a definite time. I know that. At least one or two questions, some student can ask a question.
Okay, sure. If anyone wants to ask a question, please raise your hand, or you can either use the chat window also. Anyone?
No, it's I mean, it's actually not asking question. You can actually converse with, interact with Unnisa. It's a kind of an opportunity. Another one, very prominent cartoonist,
Yeah.
Maybe in your students there are cartoon, I know who, no, I don't know in the list.
Okay. In fact, the study that you have done with the paper that you have done with the lockdown cartoons of E.P. Unnisa, it is actually bringing out the layered meanings of the cartoon. That was what I wanted to tell you in the beginning itself. Once you look at a picture or image or anything, or a video or anything, what is actually getting is not the physical elements that is being presented to you. What we are assimilating from the and the overall impact that is being created, and the thinking process, the thought process is ignited, and it is assuming new proportions in your mind. That is that is where the Unnisa's cartoons, I find it amazing, and I don't know how to describe it. And it is some sort of politically charged, politically incisive, maybe cutting with sharp edges. The brush has so many sharp edges that will cut through so many social issues that we are feeling. I think if anyone has no questions to raise, we shall, because the time is also getting late, so we shall move on to the very interesting presentation of Sri C.S. Venkateswaran.
So, no, Sanjit, I mean,
Okay, before I move on, please conclude. Or if you want to say something.
No, let me thank Unisa because
Sure. Please.
Let me thank Unisa for participating in our program and also, giving us his note for using his cartoon for the study and also publishing it in your book. And also that cover, particularly that cover. I mean, it's a very interesting. The very caption, the epic of compassion. The very term, epic of compassion, because that cartoon came just at that moment where the migrants were fleeing from their homes. And the Ramayana was was going to was telecast in the Doordarshan, and the very Ramayana which actually propelled the kind of a politics in India, a kind of right-wing politics in India. So it was telecast, and the minister was sitting closely at his home and sitting, I am watching. So the epic of compassion, that very captioning and that epic and the compassionless, the compassionless situation that was overwhelming or the migrants. So that for that cartoon itself, that cartoon, just that one cartoon will reveal the kind of attitude of the political class towards the real issues, encountered after the COVID, the real issues encountered by the people, the public at large, at least the people below the middle class, to face the real crisis of this COVID. So that single cartoon. So I am thankful to Nisano for giving us those cartoons for study, also for publishing, and also as the cover. Thank you, sir, once again. So
can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure. Sri C.S. Venkateswaran is asking a question. Please.
Just kind of, it seems like Unisa himself was saying, like, when politics itself becomes kind of caricaturing, what can cartoon do? So second thing is, like, in the social media age we live in, trolls everywhere. It is trolls. We are living in the age of trolls. Everybody has become a cartoonist, so in a sense, like, you are working on images, you're working on sound bites to troll everything and everyone. So what is the afterlife of cartoons? When you are living in an age of trolls everywhere, or is it a kind of legacy media where because cartoon demands a different kind of interface with the reader, with the one who is looking at the cartoon. There is a certain kind of continuity to it. There is a kind of a narrative, as you said, certain themes that persist through years, through certain styles, through certain cartoonists, through certain papers. So you have a certain kind of, it works in a kind of continuum of politics as well as, of styles and, concerns. But in this age of trolls, where everything is momentary, where there is an excess of whatever humor, how do you look at the future of cartoons? You have to unmute, sir. Unmute.
I'll answer the second part first on trolls and what trolls do to cartooning. You're right. Trolls are all over the place. But I don't look at it as a problem at all. I think anything that expands any kind of critical faculty or irreverence is good for a cartoon. Because there's a huge deficit of irreverence. Because parallelly, why are trolls happening? Whether responsible, irresponsible, sometimes ideologically problematic, all of that is true. But then there is so much of sanctimonious humbug around us that a lot of trolling is good. It will open up minds. Let more open minds look at cartoons. And cartoons can certainly, I'm not saying compete, cartoons can coexist. And you have to understand that cartooning is also a lot of convergence is taking place within cartooning itself. It's not just the printed cartoon, the web cartoon, storytelling cartoons, cartoons that is like sequential cartoons, which work a little different from the conventional comics. There are large graphic novels that are getting sold. People are doing wonderful things with music videos into which they're putting cartoons. So cartoons are also becoming a very dynamic medium. I don't think it will remain just a legacy medium. It will be more than that. It will also, I find the cartoon is one of the most friendly genre. It can easily befriend the word as well as the image, moving image. See, it has made friends with cinema. That's how you got your animation cartoon. It made friends with the literary genre. That's why you got your graphic novel. So cartoons will continue. Cartoons, again, where I find the threat to cartooning is on its conventional platform, which is the print media. There, cartoons seem a little endangered.
Sir, I have a question. Can I ask?
Of course, of course. Please.
Can I ask? Okay.
Sure, please.
Okay.
Success
of any cartoon depends on the pre-knowledge of the world by the audience. And as MG pointed out, now it is the era of news in brief or one-liner news. There is no need of the audience, no need of any kind of background information. They only get the fact only. So the range of or the realm of pre-knowledge is being shrink. It is in that sense lost a kind of the wide angle perspective towards the world affairs. In that sense, what kind of problems that a cartoonist, as a cartoonist, do you feel? Because the pre-knowledge range is nowadays limited due to the audience's perspective towards the very crux of the fact. That is my question.
Yeah, I understand your question. What you've been saying is absolutely true about what's been there around the last couple of decades. But I think it's changing. See, with the advent of the internet and the Google and all that, there is very little scope of anybody not having pre-knowledge. If you don't actually need to have pre-knowledge, supposing you're reading a cartoon or an article, you find an unfamiliar word or a turn of phrase or some reference to something, you will parallelly Google and get it out if you're an interested reader or viewer. So, I mean, look at the way people listen to Carnatic music concerts now. The moment a composition is sung and they're not sure about the raga, they Google it immediately and find out the raga and continue to enjoy the concert. So it adds to the appreciation. So see, it will be public memory is no longer as short as it used to be. We are all used to this conventional cliché belief that attention spans are shrinking, public memory is going. Now there is a new threat, public memory is coming back, which might be a bigger threat to communication, because anybody can ferret out old images, what you said 20 years ago, and ask you why are you contradicting yourself. Because the moment the net came, anything that goes into the net gets parallelly archived. And with search engines, you can retrieve them. The whole business of communication is changing around us. So I think it will be very difficult for me to get a reader without a baggage, but we got pre-knowledge. More often the baggage is the problem.
So there is a comment in the group chat. Lizzie Veena, would she like to read her comment, or she says that the advent of the new media has given rise to memes. Advent of the new media has given rise to memes. Memes can be used as effectively as the political cartoons. So I mean, the was also talking.
Was just saying, he talked about trolls. Memes are more or less in the same league. So I have partly answered the question. If you want me to extend the idea, it's just that, see, as long as anything happens, any audio, visual effort at poking fun, causing irreverence, ability to raise a laugh, all that is good, according to me.
Yeah.
You can criticize that, which does not mean that any one of them is beyond criticism, because you can question the validity of it, you can question the ideology of it, you can question anything about it. I'm not saying a cartoon itself is beyond criticism. No way. All of us can be criticized. But the fact that some irreverence is happening into sanctimony of Hamburg, around us is very good. There's too much of sanctimony of humbug in this country.
Yeah, I will end with this, sir. With all the all the memes and trolls, the cartoons. I mean, the legacy cartoon still provokes. No, Charlie Hebdo. No, it was. I mean, it happened a couple of years back. Charlie Hebdo, we have the experience. No, in the cartoonist from Bengal, he was put up in the jail. The cartoonist with their legacy medium. I mean, if in the quote legacy medium, still can provoke the political or the poor.
That is got quote unquote validity and see, it's an editorial art. See, my cartoon is seen by an editor before it is printed. Memes and trolls are not. There is editorial interface. That's very important. That's probably interesting for your students also. Communication. See, cartoon is vetted. If I upload a cartoon on the net, that's different. But usually a newspaper cartoonist whose cartoons are used in the web, I would have been vetted by an editor or a newsroom. So if I make some mistake, for instance, or if I say something completely unrelated or inadvertently say something in bad taste, 2 or 3 editors are certainly going to look at it and tell.
MGR's here, I mean, Asianet still has his Munshi, and when Mohan was doing, Mohan had his cartoon in Asianet, the only television channel which has something resembling cartoon, we have Munshi. Then Mohan used to do cartoon in Asianet. When he had one small piece in Asianet.
Right.
Yeah.
Unni, I just want to ask you a question. I mean, in fact, I didn't want to take the time which is supposed to be given to the students. Students should have been asking more questions because we are meeting one of the best cartoonists of the country, and I think they may be a bit overawed or something. Where are you sitting, Unni? Palakkad or Delhi?
Yeah, Palakkad.
Okay. So, this is a question that looks like a bit cliche, but the reason for so many Keralites coming to the cartoon world, because this is a question everybody asks, and everybody has his own or her own answers. Like we have better sense of humor, we are politically literate and things. But these are things applicable to a lot of other communities. For Bengalis are politically literary conscious, politically aware. Everything is there, but there are no major Bengali cartoonists in the whole pantheon of Indian cartoonists. But what is your take on this? Why so many from Kerala?
As it is, like you have also gone through, we have filtered all this out. The residual factor seems to be the cliche thing about which we are all proud of. The renaissance that happened, called the social reform movement. It's a kind of convergence. Social reform, there's a kind of acceleration of social reform, political radicalization, and the printing press, literacy. All 3 happened more or less. I think they overlapped.
Right.
Where I think I trace it in my absolutely, what shall I say, non-serious manner to the tea shop. Tea shop is, in fact, tea shop is not such a non-serious thing. There's an academic work done on the tea shop in Malabar,
correct,
where social anthropologist Adrian C. Clark came, visited tea shop, toured around Malabar, and said that this is the most important social institution that created it, that busted interdining taboos. I mean, silently created some kind of conversation. Interdining taboos were busted. People of all kinds started coming up to a point. I mean, probably there were restrictions, but some kind of mingling happened in tea shop. And these conversations, according to me, must have easily, given the kind of politics that was happening, must have been verbal cartoons. So it was only a matter of putting those things with minimal drawing skills. I think the cartoon in Kerala has been largely politics-led.
Right.
That is the energy, even now, what we have after all these years is politics. Politics.
Right.
Nothing but politics.
Right.
Just to add to MGR's observation. One thing I think we all share as Malayalis are 2 things. I mean, one is irreverence and cynicism. Every Malayali will share irreverence and cynicism, which is very core to cartooning. And actually, Ranjit Panikkar in his Lelam has talked about this irreverence through his character song.
And this other issue, one more last question maybe from my side. It's actually the human tragedies which lead to the best literature, the best art, painting. Paintings like Peter Bruegel on Plague, or Boccaccio on Decameron Plague. I mean Camus' Plague, or Daniel Defoe. So this is a very sort of and many people have actually essayed on that. K.P. Appan has actually written an entire book on how human tragedies create, or Rajakrishnan's Rogathinte Book. All of them, it's like a lotus that actually, blooms in the mud, or in this kind of thing. What is your take on this? You people are, the muse is actually a tragedy for all you creative people.
We have, I indicated right from the beginning that we have a certain difficulty in commenting on an issue like health crisis like this, the pandemic. One thing is that it cuts out all other news. It becomes the dominant news day after day. So you can't avoid it. But it's not easy to comment on. Even a riot, Abu used to say that how the hell do you comment on a riot? Guys will break into a laugh very easily. And that is your thing is very different. But then you have to do it. So, but in retrospect, if you look at it, the intervening period between the world wars, when the Great Depression happened, 1929, collapse of the New York Stock Exchange, absolute misery. That is when cartooning cut its teeth. You'll be interested to know, because we're all media people. So what happened was the newspaper editors then in the US, they have to talk up the market.
Right.
Because the market was collapsing. So they had to keep on talking up the market. But they allowed the cartoonists to do the truthful thing. They threw on the misery, what was happening on the ground. So after the crisis, and cartoonists gained credibility because the crisis was not ending in a hurry.
Correct.
On and on. Depression went on into a world war.
Right.
So the cartoonists in those few years gained more credibility than in a century.
Right.
That's when people start trusting the cartoons.
In fact, people would like to have it. It's a process of resistance and overcoming the miseries. They get that strength.
Cartoon is essentially it's a political poster art. It came from the street as a one-sided propagandist medium. You realize when it can tell the newspaper off.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, E.P. Unnisa.
Thanks, Unnisa.
That was a wonderful conversation, which is giving a lot of insights into not just cartooning, but the thought process that goes behind cartooning. And it is actually talking to the emergent trends in humor in the contemporary life of human beings. So,
I hope we'll all meet in happier times.
Yeah. Right, we have to.
In fact, if through this virtual meeting, it is sometimes the audio is breaking, some other distraction is happening always. I would like to have this conversation face to face, because it will be much more fruitful and much more, giving us so many other things than this virtual, because virtual is actually forestalling so many things. So let us be happy with what we have got right now. So Damodar Prasad, Sri E.P. Unnisa, thank you very much for this conversation. Now let me move on to Dr. C.S. Venkateswaran, who needs, as I said earlier, no introduction at all in the, especially among the film buffs. Now today he is going to talk about post-COVID cinematic imaginations. I am not saying anything further on that. I open the floor to Sri C.S. Venkateswaran.
Thank you, Sanjeev, for this opportunity, and also for the wonderful book, which is very timely and also relevant. Actually running out of time. We are already late. So I think I'll just talk about what is happening to cinema and what could happen to cinema of the future, the post-COVID so-called new normal. Like any other art form, cinematic imagination too is and will be affected by this pandemic. But in the case of cinema, it'll be all the more severe, as its very imagination, the process of production and modes of reception and appreciation are deeply social and public in its nature. So the new normal of the post-COVID world, I think, will be deeply and indelibly marked and shaped by the pandemic experience. It is not that everything will be back to old normal. Cinema as a public art and a public space, as a mass medium of global reach, and as a global corporate industry, everything needs to explore new modes and ways of being due to the pandemic. As we mentioned earlier, like in history, deep crises, whether it be physical, political, social, or spiritual, have triggered human imagination and creativity. It could be man-made tragedies like wars, natural disasters, or those triggered by microorganisms like virus, resulting in devastating pandemics like plague or COVID. Such sudden incursions from the outside, or implosions of nature, or inflictions upon the human body, all unsettle the status quo and make old solutions and answers redundant or obsolete, and forces us to look at the world, life, and art, anew and afresh. It is because the questions and conflicts of the present pose new challenges to humanity and human thought. So the temporary equilibrium of thought, complacency of human life, living and livelihood are unsettled, forcing humankind to change tracks, think differently or out of the box. In the practical sense, it's also kind of coping strategy, that is to cope with new challenges, and also a realization about the limits of the status quo, or what we take as normal or as given, and a sort of rejection and rebellion against it. So it combines all this. There's a coping up, there's a kind of realization, there is also a kind of rebellion or rejection. It calls for reimagining. It calls for looking at a different way of life, different way of being together, a different world altogether in essence. So present COVID crisis has severely affected, I think, the three core areas of human life. And so also livelihoods and global economy at large. These three areas, I think, are movement, communication and exchange, and interaction interface. These are three areas, I think, which are deeply affected by this crisis. Physical movement, that is physical movement of human bodies is restricted. One can't move out or about, leading to confinement to limited spaces, immobility of human bodies, their homeboundedness, all these leading to certain kind of loneliness, also certain kinds of reflection, meditativeness, and also boredom and despair. So it's a kind of a different kind of being with oneself that one is undergoing in the COVID situation. There are also restrictions upon direct communication and physical exchange. This has forced the whole world to shift to virtual and online modes of communication and exchange, transforming our relationship with and experience of the material and human world around us. Likewise, the impossibility of human physical interaction limits the physical interface between and coming together of human beings and groups, which again is pushed to online and virtual modes and realms, just like what we are doing now. Otherwise, what would have been a physical kind of get together of people and meeting with each other has become a kind of virtual kind of coming together of people. So these shifts or limitations deeply affect our lives at three levels. As individual beings, as personal human bodies, as social beings, or as a social and political body, in its inhabitation of a physical world, and as a species being, a human species itself facing a severe challenge to its existence. So as an individual, personal being, personal body, human being, as a social being, as a political being, and also species being, we are being threatened by this COVID situation. These shifts changes one's relationship to an awareness of oneself, society, and the world. As an individual meditative spiritual self that reflects and thinks, as a political being that acts upon the world, and as a planetary being that exists on this planet. This species nature of human being is manifested in its most severe form now, because we see the human species on the earth as one single body, linked and wired by the virus, freely, which travels freely across, unhindered, through human bodies across the globe. So in a way, human being, species being is revealed in all its starkness and all its relatedness to each other and also to the ecology we live in. This changes at three levels of the meditative reflective self that confronts itself through its loneliness, confinement, and immobility. The social and political being that is forced into physical withdrawal and alienation with and from society and community, unable to gather or congregate, and this chilling experience of the fragility of human life on the planet Earth. All these actually calls for a different kind of imagination about human body, self, life and death, society and sociality, and also about our oneness and responsibility as a species. All our notions, understandings, and questions about the fragility of our existence as human species, our notions about life and death, labor and leisure, globalization and development, public and private, all need to be seen, understood, addressed afresh and anew. Obviously, these are also very deep aesthetic questions as it concerns beauty, truth, and ethics. Our notions and experience of time, space, and context also change in such situations, as I try to argue in the paper and the book about cinematic imaginations of, where I take three films from three different languages, three different regions. How does it actually cinematic or language and narrative, how does it actually address or confront this issue of the pandemic at three different levels or three different dimensions of time, space, and context? In the case of cinema, I think it is characterized by three important crucial features. I think one is its globality, its hybridity, and its publicness. Because I think that is what makes cinema very, very unique. And that is what makes other kinds of, even after the invention of different kinds of, visual entertainment media like television or internet or all these kinds of, other kinds of platforms of visual experience, and also very personalized, domesticated kind of, home theater viewing and all such gadgets, which have become smaller, accessible, online, instantaneous, and all that. Cinema still survives, or its magic of cinema still survives because of its, publicness, its ability to hybridize, and its globality. Because these characteristics or qualities determine the form, content, politics, and aesthetics of cinema, and also the modes of control over its production, distribution, and consumption. While globality and to a certain hybridity have been exacerbated or energized by COVID situation, because it has become its global kind of reach and penetration has become really multiplied. Its publicness of cinema has been severely affected. That is what the point at which I want to emphasize. By publicness, I mean the experience of watching cinema in a common space, like theater halls or other spaces, where audience congregate, sit in the dark, alone but together, and watch huge images projected onto the screen. No other art form or visual entertainment format, however easy and intimate they may be, have been able to substitute for this magic of cinema as a public art. So how will cinema overcome this enforced ban of COVID on its basic characteristic of publicness? I think the aesthetics and thematics of post-COVID cinema will be shaped by the way these tendencies and basic characteristics of cinema are going to work out. How is it going to pan out as an industry, as an art form, as a medium? These are also questions. There is also the question of increasing levels and extent of globality, which by furthering and deepening the process of instantaneous accessibility of visual cultural products across the globe, which is going to mold and impose much more a greater uniformity and seriality to the aesthetics of cinema. As somebody like M.G. Radhakrishnan was saying earlier, like when actually news format is getting smaller, you want bits and bytes, 100 news within 10 minutes and all that. If you look at the other kinds of experience, if you look at the OTT platforms, actually the emphasis has shifted from short to longer versions. You are watching teleserials. The whole focus is on longer form. So I think we are going for short bits of reality and large chunks of fiction and narratives. So this is a kind of change that is happening because it's creating a kind of new kind of visual language, visual narratives, and also a new kind of audience patterns, which is very curious to look at because COVID is really creating a huge change in terms of watching. For instance, with the coming of, for instance, the shifting of education to e-platforms, every house, every home with a student has to become online, has to have connectivity, has to have smart gadgets. which is also an extension of the market for teleserials and Netflix or Amazon or OTT platforms. So you have to see it as a kind of a new kind of dynamism is at work, which is going to deeply affect all kinds of visual cultural expressions, whether it be television will be the most affected, and also cinema and other forms, which in the post-COVID age will have to rediscover, reimagine, replace itself. So I'll end with this, there is also the question of increasing levels and extent of globality, which I was talking about, by furthering and deepening the process of instantaneous accessibility of visual cultural products from across the globe, which is going to impose and mold a certain kind of uniformity and seriality to the aesthetics of cinema, as well as all kinds of visual expressions. So I'll end with a few questions. In the global mainstream cinema of recent times, for instance, especially in the post-globalization, post-Cold War times, this has been accelerating. There's a clear kind of shift towards this shrinking of time scales and simultaneous expansion or elaboration upon space. There's a shrinking of time sense, and also it's also the rejection of history on all kinds of memories, and also there's a kind of expansion, elaboration of space. A lot of narratives that you watch, there's all this new generation, all these narratives inspired by Mexican, Korean films, and all these are actually happening in very short time spans, within a day, a few hours. Everything is immediate. Everything is, it is as if it's a kind of reflection of the times you live in, where you are flooded with instantaneous, real-time, information, news, images, in narratives, and all that. So there's a kind of certain kind of I don't know whether I should call it fake immediacy to the whole narratives, around the narrative, where the narrative is built. So there is a kind of shrinkage of time, while there is an expansion of space, because all these films, all these narratives actually explore space in a much better, much deeper, much interesting ways, as is evident in Malayalam cinema the last decade. So there is a certain quickening of time and temporalities within the narratives, which obfuscates one's sense of history of time, but intensifies the experience of space. Given the spatiality of COVID, because Susan Sondheim says there are two kinds of diseases, So there are time diseases and space diseases. Cancer, she calls, is a time disease, where it eats you away, wastes you away in time scale. Whereas plague is a kind of, or tuberculosis is a kind of space disease, which is related to certain spaces and certain climates and all that. So maybe COVID is a kind of spatial kind of, where it is, it reaches the whole globe. So this actually is this tendency of the pandemic going to translate into post-COVID narratives. It's further shrinking timescales and expanding the dimension of space. The spatial nature of this pandemic, is it going to further strengthen spatiality of globalization, which as an industry, it is actually doing, and its global control over space, and thus its future narratives. Hybridity, which is another, which I was pointing out, hybridity, which is another characteristic of cinema, which its ability, its versatility to borrow from, to adapt to all kinds of medias. Is it going to be more and more of technical kind of nature rather than that of local imaginations, different kinds of temporalities, indigenous narrativities, and also different localities? So it is going to be, is there going to be a kind of, you look at the series, tele-series, formats, if you closely follow them, there is a kind of shift towards, a kind of certain kind of global format, certain kinds of global forms of entertainment, certain kinds of global of styles of narrative, even imaging, compositional practices of thematics and dramatics that is happening. So how is it going to pan out? How is it going to actually affect cinematic imagination is another question which we should ponder upon, I think. So and again, will publicness be totally undermined, substituted, and replaced by individualized, personalized, and domesticated forms of access, sharing, and viewing, making it more and more virtual rather than a physical experience? So is the whole idea about cinema as a sensorium, is it going to become obsolete, or is it going to, the challenge is to rediscover its sensorial, rediscover cinema as a sensorium? Again, will cinema be able to explore other ways of being together, other forms of social imagination and sociality? From the pandemic experience of panic, death, and social seclusion, will it be able to generate and imagine counter narratives of time, space, and context? If so, how is it going to reimagine human beings and humanity at all levels, as individuals and persons, as social and political beings, and also as a species? Thank you.
Thank you, Sri C.S. Venkateswaran. That was a very unique way of seeing how the post-COVID pandemic imaginations, what would be the nature, or is a loud thinking on the travel through the space, time, and context continuum. And in fact, in the book, in the paper that you have given to this book, you have articulated through three cinemas how these three aspects have been found out in cinematic expressions, and how these are actually interrelated and interconnected in novel ways. I am afraid if anyone has questions, then please put it in chat room so that we will take the questions together towards the end of the webinar. And now let me invite Dr. Lakshmi Pradeep, HOD and Assistant Professor, Farouk College, Calicut, to present the gendered lens of pandemic. Dr. Lakshmi Pradeep.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Sure.
Hello.
Sure, you are audible, no problem.
Respected dignitaries and my dear friends, a very warm good afternoon to one and all. It's been a very interesting morning today. We had a very unique and novel sessions, all of them. And I thank all the participants for the patiently waiting to listen to me, because I know a webinar can be an exhausting program. It's not like a real time on a webinar seminar, because it is difficult to sit glued to the laptop or to the phone for more than 2 hours. Still, I hope to make it as interesting and palatable to all of you. Okay, so for me personally, it was wonderful to get, it was a pleasure to get a chance to share a few thoughts with all of you about this, the gendered lens of the pandemic. Unraveling the feminist perspective of the COVID-19 was an interesting journey for me personally. And I thank Sanjeev for giving me this opportunity. And I think it was also a reflection of his social commitment. Thank you so much. Let me present my slides. Okay. Yeah. So I hope all of you can see the PPT. I thought I can go faster with that. That is why. Okay. So basically, we know that every pandemic has a feminist perspective. And today the world is witnessing one of the greatest catastrophes across the globe, enveloping us almost in a feeling of powerlessness. Just as mankind was flaunting its global village connections, each one of us, you and me, we had to retreat into our own personal shell. In fact, mankind has been humbled by a disease which could have a free run across the globe. And this COVID-19 has struck the world economy in a way that no other crisis has done before. We can talk of the Spanish flu of 1918, but then it has struck a world which is very different from our present day global village. At this critical juncture of our civilization, when the coronavirus has thrown to the winds our taken for granted world and revealed the deep fissures in our society, it is time to take stock about a post-corona world and take steps to bring about a more equitable and fair world. At present, it is an ongoing crisis, as Shailaja teacher was telling us. It is unfolding in myriad forms throughout the world. Predictions are difficult about its impact on our society. And in fact, we are yet unable to fathom the extent and reach of this catastrophe. The world is still trying to come to terms with this new way of life. How will the post-corona world be? It will be chaotic. The virus has exposed the vulnerabilities and the fragilities of the present system. If the fight against this epidemic has been compared to a war, what are the forces at play in this war against the pandemic? How do caste, race, gender, and other fault lines operate in strategies to cope with the virus epidemic? From bus drivers to prime ministers, right up to the president of USA, people from all walks of life are falling seriously ill with COVID-19. The disease itself doesn't discriminate, yet it is having different effects on different groups of people, and some groups are affected more. Now, coming to gender, it operates as a major factor in the general landscape of the human battle against an epidemic. This pandemic, like all other pandemics in the long march of history, will have long-lasting effects on gender equality. The gender narrative. To begin the gender narrative, the initial data indicated a big difference in the death rates of men and women, and we came across several reasons as to why the COVID-19 is killing more men than women. Some said it is related to a better immune system among the females, the hormones, a healthier lifestyle among women compared to men. We know that gender-based lifestyle differences can be seen across the globe. For instance, smoking. In China, 50% of men smoke, in contrast to just 5% of Chinese women. The World Health Organization also told us about the inherent biological advantage for the females and how females have a major immunological advantage over males due to the double X chromosome and so on. But yet we don't have complete answers to why some groups are more susceptible. The latest figures suggest that the gender differences have narrowed down compared to the initial stages of the pandemic. And now men account for 53% of the confirmed cases and 58% of the deaths. Yet, in countries like Afghanistan, men account for 70% of the cases and 74% of the COVID deaths. Now, why? There is a concern that this wide discrepancy is the result of gender inequalities that shut women out of the healthcare system and the public sphere. Decades of conflict and widespread poverty have stretched the fragile healthcare infrastructure in countries like Afghanistan, and often women are likely to be left out of the system because of the prevalent patriarchal traditions. Moreover, searching for female doctors is a Herculean task in rural areas. The shadow pandemic. Today, the challenges women face can vary from country to country based on cultural, religious, and socio-political factors. Yet, we can see a common thread of gender inequality across the globe. There is a whole range of health consequences that women will have to face throughout this crisis. From the healthcare workers whose health is put at risk without sufficient protection, to the health of women having to endure the abuse at home, to the mental health of mothers on whose shoulders the homeschooling of children mostly fell. The health of women as a group will bear the consequences of this crisis. A contemporary reflection highlighting the ethical and the political implications of the epidemic in India, particularly for India's women, is the need of the hour. Women keep trying to balance so many different things as they move on in life. Now I would like to talk about the issue of domestic violence. Alarm bells are ringing as the World Health Organization has pointed out that COVID-19 has led to an increase in domestic violence and sexual exploitation the world over. Here, stress, financial difficulties, and alcohol consumption, they all can be triggers for the violence in the home, and the quarantine measures will increase these. Stay home and stay safe. I think it's an irony for these hapless victims as they are trapped together with their perpetrators. They cannot go out. They are cut off from their friends, unable to make phone calls, complain, or even move to a safer place. In addition to physical violence, which is not present in every abusive relationship, common tools of abuse include constant surveillance, restrictions on access to basic necessities such as food, clothing, sanitary facilities, and so on. In fact, the trend of this rising domestic violence is seen in the data of developed and developing countries, countries like France, Italy, Spain, Australia, China, and so on. We can see now coming to India. In India too, there is an increase in the number of domestic violence complaints. The National Commission of Women has expressed concern at the rapid increase in the number of domestic violence complaints. Now coming to Kerala, the extent of domestic violence against women in Kerala has not increased alarmingly, according to Kerala Vanida Commission member, Advocate M.S. Tara. She attributes this low rate of complaints, perhaps, to Kerala's local community empowerment, our high levels of education and public awareness, the politically educated community, the robust public health system, and the grassroots democracy, which has helped us in community outreach and thereby perhaps to tackle this problem to a certain extent. But of course, there are dissenting voices and there are people who opine that these statistics are not true. I leave it to you to think on that. Another fear globally is that this pandemic can trigger a wave of violence committed by people unable to deal with loss of power, dealing with financial instability, which is a very likely possibility for many people in the post-COVID world. And this can lead to anger, frustration, and violence, which can be a threat to society at large and also on the home front. Now, evidence and research from several earlier public health crises, like the Ebola crisis in Africa in 2014, the recent outbreaks of SARS, swine flu, bird flu, etc., suggest that with the lockdown, there is a rise in domestic violence, in sexual abuse, rise in unwanted pregnancies, teenage pregnancies, and unsafe abortions. For instance, UNESCO has warned of increased school dropout rates, which will disproportionately affect adolescent girls, as COVID-19 has forced school closures in several countries. In India, the nationwide COVID-19 lockdown and the lack of access to family planning methods is projected to lead to a spurt in unwanted pregnancies and abortions. It's likely to result in an additional 7 lakh childbirths, 15 lakh abortions, including 8 lakh unsafe abortions and 1,700 maternal deaths. Recently, we witnessed the sad death of twin children during delivery, even in a state like Kerala, partly due to the prevailing COVID scenario. Looking back, one consequence of the Ebola epidemic in Africa was a dramatic increase in maternal mortality. In fact, if you see the figures from 2013 to 2016, during the Ebola outbreak, more women died of gynecological complications than the infectious disease itself. This was due to the unavailability of sexual and reproductive health services during the Ebola lockdown. These are not considered to be essential services. And I think this is a point policymakers need to keep in mind in the present day context too. The pandemic has monopolized everyone's attention, and other health issues faced by women are often forgotten. It has disrupted women's access to sexual reproductive health and services to fight gender-based violence at a time when women need these services the most. Also, women are more likely than men to suffer from depression. Very often it is hormone-induced, such as premenstrual, menopausal, etc. But these issues are not discussed adequately in the public sphere, as women are trained to follow the culture of silence. Now, next, coming to women's unpaid care work. This is important for the family, for the society, and the economy. Now, the current delegation of care responsibility results from the historical and cultural framework of male breadwinner and female caregiver. This has been governing our family, our market, and our state ideologies over decades. We know that just a few months of a pandemic-induced lockdown is not going to perpetuate an equal division of domestic labor between members of households and bring about a remarkable behavioral or attitudinal change in society. So at home, women are expected to do most of the housework besides caring for the children, for the family. In Asia, the statistics say women are already spending 4 times more of their time on unpaid care work than men. 4 times more. Under lockdown conditions, in addition to childcare and household chores, women are now confronted with additional responsibilities such as homeschooling, more intense care of the sick people, and so on. So we can see how women are at the forefront of the fight against COVID. So next, we can see that if it's a nurse or a policewoman or a doctor who returns home from work is expected to cook, clean, and so on, with little concern for her own rest while facing resentment for putting the family at risk. And this is true, I think, around the world. Women are hard hit in the absence of maids, domestic helpers, and creches as they juggle care and domestic responsibilities while working online. Even amongst women employed in higher education, the same trend is seen. Evidence is emerging of decreased research productivity by female professors in an analysis of gender and journal submission data. COVID-19 and its consequences have taken a toll on female authors as they desperately try to balance teaching and working from home with increased caregiving responsibilities, such as all-day minding of small children due to school and daycare closures. However, in spite of that, I think there are a few positive trends, at least among some groups within the middle class. The winds of change have started blowing in society. The COVID-19 has disrupted the traditional gender division of labor. Since domestic helps are no longer available, men have to chip in and help with domestic chores as a matter of survival. So the attention that this is cornering in the social media has led to a sort of sudden glorification of the routine domestic chores by males. Perhaps patriarchal attitudes are changing, and this may be a good beginning of shared housework in families. Now, next, I would like to come to the women health workers. There is no doubt that women are one of the greatest assets to prevent the spread of COVID, as they contribute 67% of the frontline health workers globally. In countries like USA and Canada, the percentage, Spain, Germany, and all, women form more than 80% of all healthcare workers. So they constitute a major section of the healthcare providers. And we all know that healthcare providers are at a high risk of being exposed to the virus. The skewed gendered ratio of frontline caregivers and nurses, plus the shortage of good quality personal protective equipment, heightens their vulnerability to sickness. Healthcare workers are undervalued, underpaid, and they fear speaking out due to their precarious employment status. Many of them are excluded from several basic essential working conditions. Paid annual leave, medical leave, minimum wage coverage, social security, insurance, and so on are denied to most of them. Any action plan by policymakers need to keep in mind the gendered nature of the workforce and the risk that these female health workers incur. In Kerala and in India also, women are in the frontline healthcare. Often they are overworked and underpaid. And I think this is true in the case of Anganwadi workers too, mostly women who are underpaid, undertrained, and lacking job security. Even as we talk of all these, women everywhere are affected adversely. The most vulnerable are hit the hardest. Millions of these women will be pushed from poverty to extreme poverty. For instance, take the plight of female sex workers, the refugees, the migrant women. Very often they do not have access to health care and insurance, welfare, or social benefits. Now, besides all these dark clouds looming in the horizon, we can see a few silver linings in the future. Just like how the World War II left its lasting impact on generations. During the World War II, we saw a huge influx of women into the workforce, which did not stop after the war. And certainly, I think financial independence for women was a turning point in gender relations in times to come. So also, the shifting norms created in these troubled COVID times, such as workplace flexibility, work from home, everything online, will make it easier to combine careers and homes. Women will benefit more due to these changes in the business culture because historically they are the main providers of childcare. Yet one thing is certain, when dealing with pandemics, women's voices too needs to be reflected at the decision-making table. It is important to develop a culture of including women in the policy and planning formation. All epidemics have gendered effects, and COVID-19 is the latest in the long line of epidemics that have brought inequalities to the forefront, including those around gender. But no one talked about it earlier, and policymakers were not even aware of the relevance of this perspective. Global feminist movements have raised their concerns and demanded gender-responsive state policies. There is a pressing need to ensure that the world post-COVID is built on principles of human rights and gender equality. Women must be a part of decision-making in national budgeting process, The responses must be formulated with the aim to reduce inequalities of all types, redistribute wealth, and achieve human rights. And I think for this, a structural change is needed. A number of feminist networks have launched a collective statement for a feminist policy on COVID-19, and this was conveyed to the United Nations. The statement sought to steer them towards solutions that do not magnify existing gender inequalities. I think as an eternal optimist, we must look at the positive side. And I think COVID-19 has also created new opportunities for solidarity and collective action. Across the world, there is a realization that this cannot be, as Shailaja Sita said, is this what human beings are? Is this what humanity is all about? So there are questions now. And across the world, there are calls for social justice in the form of accessible and adequate health care, pension schemes, social security funding, and policies that ensure a citizen's fundamental rights are secured. Some feminist activists opine that this global pandemic has opened up a window of opportunities to re-envision the world free from violence, free from sexual objectification of women and girls, free from patriarchal corruption within institutions and global exploitation. Because I think if the COVID-19 can spread globally, so can ideologies and movements which can transform society. The world is a very small place. So let us hope that all these good thoughts can also transform society. And now is the time to be united as women of the world in demanding that women's human rights be upheld and that the international frameworks, such as the United Nations International Treaty on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women and the UN Beijing Declaration, are placed firmly at the center of the global political agenda. And I think COVID-19 has clearly highlighted the failure of neoliberal capitalism, the global phenomenon of privatization of healthcare, and a gradual dismantling of the social and healthcare services over the past few decades is increasing the vulnerability and poverty of many, especially women. The cruelty of our social and healthcare systems and the fact that most of the countries do not have pro-poor policies will mean that this battle will be a battle of the fittest. Common people have been left to fend for themselves amidst loss of jobs, poor health care, and increasing poverty. The post-COVID world, the challenges are many, yet there is hope in the horizon. As Mahatma Gandhi said, nature has enough for everyone's need, but not for his greed. And this comes to our mind. Perhaps if the true meaning of the sentence is understood, the world would be a better place. And let us hope the COVID-19 scare will unleash the power to make systemic corrections and build a better world, not only for women, but for humanity at large. And thank you very much for your patient listening. With these words, I'm winding up. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lakshmi Pradeep. That was a wonderful presentation. In fact, very well-known writer Kalpana Sharma and people like Ammu Joseph have articulated and that how we are missing the half of the story without looking at the gendered lens. So it will be incomplete if we are not having this conversational presentation from your side and the book and the contributions that have been put together in the book will be incomplete if there is not a gendered lens in seeing this pandemic and its social life, of course. In fact, we are running totally out of time, and if anyone wants to ask, because I am seeing no questions in chat window, Mr. Pradeep Kumar has said that it's a well-articulated elucidation and practical presentation. And if anyone, thanks for that. And if anyone wants to ask a question, we can take just two questions, one to Dr. Lakshmi Pradeep and one to Dr. C.S. Venkateswaran. If anyone wants to take that, or we will move on to the concluding part. That was an excellent presentation. and by Dr. Lakshmi Pradeep. I think no one is coming forward. So let us move on to the formal vote of thanks by Ms. Devamol Thomas, my colleague in Marivanas College.
Good afternoon, everybody. Here we come to the end of one-day webinar, COVID-19 Infodemic Problem Prospects and Retrospects. I, Deepamal Thomas, on behalf of Marivanas College Journalism Department, to take time to thank all the speakers and participants. M.G. Radhakrishnan sir, E.P. Unni sir, Damodar Prasad sir, C. Venkadeshwaran sir, and Lakshmi ma'am have been with us for 2.5 hours. Already, they have written their insightful thoughts on COVID-19 in this book. And now we could hear them, we could see them, and we could participate with them. Here I am mentioning a deep sense of appreciation, and we are grateful to dear sirs and madam for your valuable talks. I extend our gratitude to dear sirs and ma'am for making this webinar interesting and fruitful. I thank our principal, Dr. Georgie K. sir, and all the faculty members for their kind support. Now, I extend our gratitude to all the participants, including our present and past students of journalism departments and all the participants from inside and outside Kerala. Really, the journalism fraternity of inside and outside Kerala are blessed with the presence of these eminent personalities and their words. Last but not least, I am very glad to congratulate Dr. S.R. Sanjeev, and this book is the reason behind this seminar, and really appreciate dear Sanjeev. I thank Dr. John sir, Mindo, and Dijo for your technical support. And once again, I thank all of you. Have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you all. With that, we are coming to the close of the webinar. And we have curated this webinar as the extension of the writings in this book. So I hope everyone will read it. Thank you very much for joining us. Now all of you can leave the Zoom meeting. Thank you once again.